Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, who you can also catch on his own podcast, The Rational Egoist. Mike, it's been a few days. I've been out of town. How has the Rational Egoist been going? How has the Capitalist Corner been going?
Well, you've been, living your jet set lifestyle, flying around the world, eating caviar and drinking champagne, while I was busy doing this show on Monday. Yesterday, I went to Boston to check out Rosie Ginsburg's event from the Ayn Rand Center UK. That was great. And I just did an interview before the show came on, all about purpose, which will hopefully be released tomorrow. That's on the Rational Egoist podcast. But we are glad that you could, what's the word I'm looking for is grace us with your presence. And, just for Rosie Ginsburg, if he's watching, I was, with him yesterday. We went out to dinner, and it was just amazing to me, the lifestyle that the two of you are able to live with your vast fortunes. It just really makes the rest of us want to strive to have better. Let me just put it that way.
I wish I had a vast fortune. Up in Morristown, Tennessee, is considered the plush life. And I don't think staying in the Best Western is necessarily the height of luxury. I don't think you'd see P. Diddy there. But I was nonetheless there because I don't care about that stuff. As long as I have a comfortable place to sleep, I'm good with it.
I just want to show something off real quickly. These are two pins. Let me see if I.
Somehow you cut out. I don't hear you, just so you know.
Boy, this technology stuff really sucks. But anyway, these
Hold that
two
thought.
pins. What?
Hold that thought. I have to put my I have to plug my computer in.
Oh my God. Well, I was given these two pins. You can't really see them. It's tough. But one of them is a picture of Ayn Rand, and the other one says, I speak reason. They were given to me by the great Amy Nasser. I think I'm just going to take them off so I can really show them off because these are great. So, can you see this? This is the pin with Ayn Rand's picture on it. And this I love. I'm going to be rocking this. I speak reason. Two pins given to me by the wonderful Amy Nasser. Robert is often listening. Robert, please thank your wonderful wife. I actually got to spend time with the Nassers yesterday in Boston. It was great. They're wonderful people. My jokes notwithstanding, Rosie Ginsburg is also wonderful. So was his wife, and so is his assistant, Daniel. Or not his assistant, his producer, Daniel.
Oh, Daniel was there.
His partner. Yes, Daniel was there. He's wonderful. I really like Daniel. I found out he's only 23 years old. I told Rosie he's got himself a 5-year-old Michael Jackson on his hands with Daniel.
Yeah, well, I wish I'd been exposed to objectivism as fully as Daniel has at his age. It might have changed my life. Even
they're saying that I froze and you left. I hope that all that has been resolved.
Yeah, you froze. I left because I charged up my computer last night, but then as I got on, it said it had only 10% of a charge, which is strange. So what I think happened was, boomer that I am, I didn't have the light socket turned on as it was charging all night last night, and so it didn't charge. Thank you very much. So look, the news of today, of course, the thing that's going to occupy every podcast that's political in nature is going to be the passage of the big, beautiful bill through the Senate. Now it's going to go to the House for some revisions. And there's a lot of pressure on those folks to pass that on July 4th, Independence Day. Ironically, the tax cuts in the bill amount to about $4 or $5 trillion in tax cuts, but the spending outspends that by about 2.3 trillion or more, depending on a lot of ambiguities that the Congressional Budget Office can't take into consideration now. So it goes anywhere from 2.3 billion up to trillion up to $5 trillion in excess spending. I didn't want to do this. This topic first, just because everyone was going to do it. But now that I'm into it so far, I think we have to continue with it. So what do you think of the passage of this big, beautiful bill? I'm in agreement with Elon Musk. I don't think it could be simultaneously big and beautiful.
I don't think so either. And one of the most disturbing, if not the most disturbing, I mean, yes, we could get into everything that's bad about it. It's going to drive up the debt, all that type of stuff. But it's the fact that these people don't read the bills, right?
Well, I think Schumer made them read the bill.
I think it will, I think you're right in this specific case. The fact that Schumer made them read it, though, is just indicative of how they do business on a regular basis, right? They put these bills out there and they just vote on them and agree on them without reading them. Now it's nice. Okay, so now they've read it. Now, when it goes back to the House, do you think that every member of the House is going to reread the adjusted bill as it's currently adjusted? I doubt it. Maybe somebody will make them read it as well. But it's just a very big problem. I think that Ron Paul once. Greg Lewis says he can't see us. Greg Lewis, we are not going to take your word for it right now because others have attested to that they have seen us. But Ron Paul, I think years ago, wanted to make it a law that they had to read the bills. And that is, I think, a very good thing. James Valiant says being read out loud and listening. Well, that's true, too.
Well,
Jim
that is true, but the conservative news outlets were trying to make Schumer's demand seem like a parliamentary ploy, just like a waste of time, and that may have been exactly what motivated the guy. But it also, I think, speaks to the fact that none of these folks ever read the bill, and it was actually good for them to sit through, whether they did or not, 900 some odd pages of bill. Now, whether or not a bill for the United States from the United States Congress should be 900 pages long is another.
Well, that's another problem. Yeah. Yeah.
I say there should be a page limit of 7.
Why 7?
I just made up an arbitrary term.
Well, I think we have enough arbitrary stuff going on in government without Mark's.
We do, but 7 would be a massive improvement over 900 plus or 1,100 pages, or there has been omnibus bills that have been even longer, 10,000 pages and more. How can anybody get through that legalese?
They can't. Yeah, it took me months to read War and Peace. You know what I mean? Like, how are they reading this stuff? They're not. Lee is here to remind people to don't forget to like and subscribe and share from YouTube to your platforms. Yes, 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 yes. Ashley has a new arbitrary number. Ashley says the bill should be 10 pages maximum.
I like that number too. It's a nice round figure. I mean, back in the day, our founders, of course, had less to deal with than our government today, but that's not a matter of that's not a matter of problem as much as a metaphysical problem. It's a self-made problem on the part of government doing far more than it has to do. And I think if it only did what it had to do, the bills would be reasonably lengthed, because the legislators would only be making law with respect to property, and as that evolves over time, and property protections and rights protections, they wouldn't be conspiring through 900 pages to take people's wealth from them.
Oh, as a reminder, too, by the way, although Mark and I are here to promote the American Capitalist Party, go to americancapitalistparty.org. And although he is the chairman and I am the vice chairman, remember that the views expressed here are ours and not necessarily indicative of the party as a whole. While, as I said last time, the party, we are in unison in representing the principle of individual rights. How that principle gets expressed is often subject to debate. So don't just assume that everybody in the party shares our views, as we are prone to controversy at times. Mark, is that a good way to say it?
We are prone to controversy.
And, and Mark drags me into these controversies often as I'm minding my own business, trying to be a peaceful person. And the next thing I know, I'm involved in some big problem. I always figured, if somebody would have told me, hey, listen, you're going to be friends with this big Hollywood big shot at some point, I would have said, oh, that's going to be great. And it is great, but it does have the side effect. I never would have thought that Lucifer from Supernatural would be dragging me into internet beefs. But here we are. But the point of the matter is that what we say is not necessarily indicative of the party.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, that should have been some of the first words out of my mouth. And if I keep forgetting to do that, I know that you will remember. But I'll try to make that a part of my introductory, moments there.
Your introductory spiel.
Yeah, so here's an area where you and I differ, and where reasonable people could differ, and that's the war in Gaza.
Sure.
So we have differences in this. You expressed a little of. I don't know that you ever got into the particulars of our differences when you were talking to B. Moni, but now Trump has organized a 60-day Gaza ceasefire. I want to see what you think about this. I have very specific feelings about it. So the ceasefire, of course, was broken by the Houthis, who threw a couple of projectiles at Israel. Both of them were picked off, and of course, the ceasefire with Iran was violated within 30 minutes as they attacked, as they threw missiles at Israel in a last-ditch attempt to save face. So we're dealing with folks who have only one overarching goal, and they want to achieve that one overarching goal, and nothing else matters to them. But I want to get your opinion about this 60-day ceasefire.
Well, first, I want to give a ton of credit to B. Moni, because as Katrin Kohler points out, B. Moni has apologized to a lot of people for her behavior. And as somebody who's done a lot of screwing up in life, I know that people do screw up, they do mess up. But to admit it and apologize is a very big step, and it shows there's a lot of virtue there in B. Moni. So I want to recognize that. But as for the first of all, the differences that you and I have ultimately relate to civilian casualties and bombing civilians and hitting civilians. And that stems from a slight difference in viewpoint on individual rights. I do not hold, and I might be differing from Ayn Rand a little bit here, although she never really gave a treatise on the subject. I do not hold that people whose governments don't recognize rights don't have rights. I don't believe that the individual citizens in Gaza, who may be completely innocent in not supporting Hamas, have lost their rights. Now, there's no way for me to know who those specific individuals are. It's basically the law of large numbers or some form thereof. Is I'm just saying that there's, however many hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza, I'm not going to assume that they are all card-carrying Hamas supporters. That being the case, I don't hold that they've lost their rights. Now, there's a nuance here where if you have to make, you're going after Hamas and they're embedded among civilians, then civilian casualties, unfortunately, have to be an acceptable part of war. And those casualties are firmly on the bed of Hamas. And this is the particular point where I think we differ. I do think that the Israeli government or the Israeli military should do everything that they can to take out Hamas and minimize civilian casualties to the best of their abilities. I don't think it's irrelevant. I don't think it should be their primary concern, but I do not think that it's irrelevant about the civilian casualties. So that said, now I can get to the Trump stuff. The idea, Trump is obsessed with this idea that he's the deal maker, the peacemaker. The problem is any deal that a person makes in life or a group makes in life is contingent on the good faith of the party to which you're making the agreement or with which you're making the agreement. There's no good faith on the side of Hamas. There's no good faith on the side of Iran. So while I opposed, for instance, the U.S. getting involved in Iran, once you do get involved, to say, well, I have an agreement with the Iranians is just idiotic. There's no reason to suspect that the Iranians will uphold their end of the agreement. I mean, there's already evidence that they're now withdrawing from the UN, policing them on their nuclear program, that sort of thing. And Hamas wants Israel gone. So how do you make a deal with that, or how do you negotiate with that? You simply can't. And for our president to think he's going to force that on the Israelis is ridiculous to me. But that is part of the problem with the Israelis accepting our foreign aid, is because if we're giving them money, and by we, I don't mean me, I mean the United States government giving away the taxpayers' money. I don't make enough money to pay income tax, so it wouldn't be my cash. But nevertheless, he's using Americans' money and he's funding the Israelis, and so that gives him a say, and that complicates things. But the idea that you can make an agreement with Hamas is ridiculous on its face.
Yeah, I mean, we've had dozens and dozens of ceasefire agreements in the Middle East between Israel and powers that have been attacking her for the last 77 years. All they lead to is more violence. It's why Israel has been in a perpetual state of war with those who have decided not to end antagonism towards Israel by making an actual treaty. In the case of Jordan, in the case of especially Egypt, it was land for peace, basically, and they got peace. And the other countries, Syria has refused to do that. Lebanon has not done that. And Hamas and Gaza and the West Bank also refuse to recognize Israel and even exchange land for peace. Now, with respect to the rights issue, I look at it like this. Of course, the government's responsibility is to protect the rights of the citizens. Hamas has already acknowledged that that's not its responsibility. That's the responsibility of the UN. So they have automatically given over the primary responsibility of government to another agency. They declared war. They declared war through their actions, right? By invading another country, in a sense, saying civility, law, order, and rights are irrelevant to our cause. So they themselves have sloughed off rights and civilization. The primary end of the Israeli government is to protect its own citizens. And that means end this emergency, and war is an emergency, right? An emergency is a condition under which no human life is possible. So the object in an emergency is to end it as quickly as possible so that you can resume life under proper human conditions. Now, life under proper human conditions means Hamas and the Palestinian people surrender. They give back the hostages. And they say we recognize Israel as a legitimate state. Now, surrendering in and of itself is a recognition that you are now embracing persuasion and diplomacy. Ceasefire is not. A ceasefire is a pause in hostilities until we can continue hostilities. If somebody's breaking into my house, I don't take into consideration their right to life. I take into consideration one priority, that I have to end this emergency as quickly as possible. And if that means killing that person, I'm going to do it. Likewise, with the Israeli people, they cannot prioritize Palestinians as the same value or nearly anywhere near the same value as Israeli citizens, which they are doing at great expense to their own economy and to the lives of Israeli soldiers. They are prioritizing Palestinian life, and they cannot if they want to live. They know this. And you're right, they've given over part of their moral agency to the American government, which I think has betrayed and abandoned them multiple times in our history of interconnectedness. And that does give the American government a certain amount of negotiating leverage with Israel. Unfortunately, it's always in the wrong direction. So my thought that the Palestinians have given up their rights, I think they did by an act of war. They declared their rights. They declared rights null and void. They declared only the law of the jungle, not the law of men, to be their guiding principles. And so they should be subject to the fullest law of the jungle until it is over.
Okay, so this is going to be what we're going to talk about today, because there's a lot. First of all, Catherine Cassio says the IDF have all along tried to limit civilian casualties. Kathy, from everything I know, that your statement there is accurate, and what I'm saying is that is the right policy. Mark does not think that's the right policy. That's where Mark and my disagreement comes in. What I'm saying here is not a criticism of Israel; it's a criticism of Mark's position. So there's a few things. Jim Valiant says here that Hamas uses Gazan lives as tools of war. I agree 100%, which is why if it necessitates killing civilians in order to get Hamas, I think that they should say so.
You want to see what Ariana says?
No, because I saw what she says. Mark says, fuck around and find out. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Eutychus. Eutychus says such rights considerations are for their government to consider and protect, especially in a war. No considerations of rights is tenable whatsoever. And then he says you cannot divorce the people from their government under which they are subject while in a conflict. As long as the war machine is on, they are part of the war machine. So it's how they should be treated. Mark says that the Gazans have forfeited their rights. Okay. in order to have a discussion about this, where we're saying, well, they forfeited their rights, it's up to the government to protect their rights, that sort of thing, we have to get into what, in fact, rights are. Are rights a creation of government, or do rights precede government? That's the first question that I have for Eutychus and that I have for Mark. What are rights, and do they pre-exist government?
They don't. First of all, they don't exist in a state of nature. I think they are a recognition of certain conditions certain social conditions that human beings have to operate under. It's their claims, of course, their claims to a freedom from force, basically freedoms from force, so that you have full and complete freedom of action to use your property as you see fit, to act according to your rational best interests. And this does not happen in a state of nature. It happens in a state of man. It happens in an artificial state where men must live amongst other men, and they have to set up an agreement with one another, recognizes certain facts of reality.
Okay. What is the basis of which you form a proper government and subordinate might to moral law?
Reason.
No, but on what principle? What's the principle that you do it? What serves that function of doing so?
The principle of individual rights.
The principle of individual rights, which means if you're setting up a government based on individual rights must precede government. And as far as it not existing, well, hold on 1 second, Mark. You also said that they don't exist in a state of nature. Okay. First of all, that contradicts Ayn Rand's version of rights, and it contradicts what rights are in fact. Ayn Rand says that rights are due to man based on his nature.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not.
No. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that your view of rights, first of all, we can get into a discussion about how it contradicts the facts of reality, but it also contradicts the objectivist theory of rights, because Ayn Rand's theory of rights explicitly says over and over again that rights are not a gift of God or of government. They're due to man based on his nature.
Correct.
Okay.
They are based on a recognition of his nature. Just like clothing is based on a recognition of man's nakedness and his need to survive by sheltering himself and clothes on his body.
Yeah.
Right.
So Persephone says there are two different versions of nature. Okay. If I am if I'm stranded like Tom Hanks in Castaway, or what's his name there, Robinson Crusoe, on an island, and while I'm on that island, I'm alone, and I go and I forage for food. I build myself a little setup. I've got a home. I've got my property. There's no government, and somebody comes over, and a new group arrives on the island, and they try to take my stuff. Do I have a right to defend myself?
Yes, you do.
Okay, there's no government involved, but
Indeed.
I have a right to defend myself.
Indeed, but what the government did in this case was forfeit rights.
No, I don't disagree that Hamas has forfeited its rights.
Right.
I just want to establish the principle that rights necessarily precede government. That a person without a right has the right, without a government has the right to defend their life, their liberty, and their property. Okay, so now
because we understand that, because we recognize.
Okay, so we recognize that. Right. Okay. I don't know why ARI doesn't give me a free pass while I was visiting Razi to go to Okan.
I thought you were going to Okan, by the way.
I can't afford it. It's too much money. But I don't have a right to go to Okan, so we can skip that for a second.
Wait a minute, but rights precede Okan.
They do, but that doesn't mean they have to let me in. That's their right. Okay, so if I'm now on this island and this other organization comes and they set up a government, and they decide that they're going to be government, they're going to govern this land. Nothing about that group setting up a government negates my rights. Nothing. I still have the rights that I had first, that I had beforehand. Okay, so this is
why I say governments are either legitimate or illegitimate.
Okay, now, all right. So now, if now my boss is asking me how much it is to go. It's too late for this time around, Tom. Okay, so if that government now declares war on another country, the government that I have not sanctioned, that doesn't protect my rights, that I don't like or support, that doesn't rob me of my rights. What it does do now is that other country has the right to defend itself against attack. Yes. And if in that attack I get caught in the crossfire, the fault lies with the phony government. What it doesn't do is take away my rights. My rights are violated by the people that started the war to begin with.
Okay, that's a better
Yes,
formulation.
but
I
that
think
doesn't. Okay, hold on one second. Let me just finish because it's vital. That doesn't mean that that other government can just assume I have no rights, assume I support this new government,
you don't
and
make that.
and execute me. This is my only point. That government, if it can, should not violate my rights. If it can't help it, if it has to, in order to eliminate the government on my island, it has to kill me, they're not violating my rights. But they can't just execute me willy-nilly. They have to take it
Agreed,
into
but that
consideration.
their priority is not whether or not you
I
die.
didn't say it was. I never said it was.
But it's
Their priority is getting rid of the government, getting rid of, in my
correct.
case, the government on the island, in that case,
Correct.
getting rid of Hamas. It
Correct.
doesn't mean that it does not have to be cognizant of innocent people. It just means that that's not their primary consideration.
Means taking them as equals, which they are not.
It depends what you mean by equals. What do you mean by equals?
They're not equals. The Palestinians are not morally equal in this case. They are subject to the law.
Hold on. What evidence do you have, Mark, that a random Palestinian that we pick out?
I don't have evidence for random Palestinians.
But that's the point.
I have is the broad considerations that look, when the criminal breaks into my house, he's not equal to me.
Right.
A stranger's children are not equal to my children.
Well, okay, hold on, Mark.
Our evaluations.
Are you saying? Hold on,
valuers.
Mark. Are you talking about on a metaphysical level, or what needs to be more important to you?
I'm talking about respecting subjective values, subjective evaluations. If you have kids, your kids are more important than my kids.
Okay, so the kids are more important to you, and to the Israeli government, its citizens need to be more important to it.
Yes,
I don't disagree.
Right.
But when you say
they're not treating their own citizens,
Mark, I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm saying is that when you say out loud, Palestinians are not equal to Israelis, it doesn't come off as what you mean is the Israeli government needs to prioritize its own citizens. It comes off as a metaphysical value judgment, which I don't think is what you mean. That's why I wanted to clarify.
Yes,
right.
correct.
So, but given the nature of rights and given the nature of initiation of force and how it's immoral, you can't just, if you've got a guy, for instance, say that I'm the evil terrorist and I'm in front of this building that I got behind me that we have no idea what it is, right? And you know, this is a complete hypothetical. That building is filled with innocent people. And you know that I'm going to be leaving this spot in 5 minutes. Your intel tells me. So you can either bomb me now and kill everybody that's in front of that's in that building, or you can wait 5 minutes and just kill me. That's what I'm saying that should be done. You should wait the 5 minutes. If you have no idea that I'm leaving and this is your only chance to kill me, by all means kill me, and the casualties behind me are my fault. That's my ultimate.
I'm not so against that. Ariana says Mike's right. That'd be the world thinking all the U.S. supports U.S. government actions and policies.
Listen, Ariana is an absolute genius. I've always known it. And
that's true, I think I would disagree with you in this sense. They would have to. If we attacked Canada, let's say, I think I saw an example earlier. Somebody said if we attack Canada, then and persistently attack them in an attempt to overthrow their government. So one person said they would fully expect Canada to retaliate fully, and if he got caught in the crossfire, then that would be he would understand it entirely, as I would understand it if we attacked somebody willy-nilly and tried to overthrow their government if they attacked us. Now I'm talking about a legitimate state as opposed to an illegitimate state that I think is a criminal organization that's exploiting its own people, enslaving its own people, and existing by the fact that it uses force against its own citizens. Totally different phenomenon than a free state, in my opinion. So, in fact, we are held responsible and accountable for our governments, Ariana. And I think that there are other objectivists who agree to it, but there's wide differences within the objectivist movement with respect to this concept itself. So you can expect objectivists to disagree. Did you just do that?
I did.
Oh, so you know how to do this. You know how to put these, highlight tweets.
Yeah, you click the tweet. They're not tweets. They're comments.
You know what I mean.
But yeah, you click them. and they come up on the screen. I mean, it's not a very difficult
Now,
task.
but Akira is saying something that I think is very interesting, because we have a fairly unique situation with respect to Gaza and the West Bank, not only in the way in which the government embeds itself and the militants embed themselves within the citizens, but we also have a citizenry that is largely indoctrinated by the terrorist organization, and actually thinks that what the terrorist organization is going for is virtuous.
Okay, I want you to read his statement, Mark. Just read it and tell me what's wrong with it. Two things are wrong with it, but I want you to tell me what they are.
Random Palestinians don't exist, Michael. Kids are the only innocents over there. Well, I mean, just on its face, that can't concretely be the case. But we can't establish that, because we don't know that kids are the only innocent ones there, although they are innocent,
right,
for the most part.
And the other thing is, the second part of the statement contradicts the first. That's my point. There's kids over there. Those kids, by definition, are, they're little kids. If they're not guilty, they're not terrorists, they're children. So those would be amongst the random Palestinians that I mentioned. But also, there's no way to know what you're saying. There's no way to conclude that every person over there supports Hamas. And for people that say so willy-nilly, well, it's up to them to overthrow their government, I would love to see the people that say that in those situations, right? Because it's like somebody in here says, no, we protest over here all the time. Yeah, we know the government's not going to shoot us for doing it.
Do you agree that governments like that are composed of three types of folks: active collaborators, passive collaborators, and rebels?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Active collaborators, passive collaborators, or rebels?
No, because it depends what you mean by passive collaborator. If by passive collaborator you mean somebody who's not speaking out against the government, then they're not actually a collaborator. That's a contradiction of what the word collaborator means. They're passive acceptors because they're scared to death.
Okay, but that makes them a collaborator in a sense.
It does not make them a collaborator. That's a butchering of the English language to say they're a collaborator.
If you see a crime going on and you neither take action to stop it nor call the police, are you in some way complicit? Are you in some way responsible for any of the bad that happens?
We're losing all of our audience, by the way, with this discussion.
All right, then let's move on.
Okay, and all those people, they're going to be very depressed that they missed out on this.
No, but Akira Felix says something very, very interesting here, which I think is apropos. So I have to say it, not just because it highlights my point, but he says, I guess the founders knew that nothing would happen to them, right?
No, they were incredibly brave people. That's why we recognize them as heroes.
They went up against the superpower of their time. They were mere colonial that was near starvation at every second of this fight.
And that's why they're heroes, Mark.
When they negotiated with the British said every single one of the men that has come here to negotiate with us is on the list to be executed
Not only that, but they also came out and the British also said that they would save everybody except for Samuel Johnson and I think John Hancock, if everybody would just renounce the fight, right? But there's a reason we recognize those people as heroes. Because it took tremendous courage to do what they did. To say that your average person living in Palestine who has children that could be murdered and butchered at any time right in front of them, to say that person is somehow collaborating because he's too scared to fight Hamas is just a butchering of the term collaborate. Now, and I'm just saying that it's easy to say, but not as easy when you're in there.
Of course, it's hard.
That's my only point.
And it's incredibly heroic. It's incredibly heroic to stand in the face of that kind of brutal authority.
Yeah, there's a reason we celebrate the guy who stood in front of that tank in China.
That's right. There is a reason. And the reason we emulate that and hope that under similar conditions we would do the same. Look, let's get to something sort of amusing. That's the UPenn article, or the article on UPenn. It might be under Epic Times. Yes, so I'm going to have to get clearance to go in. Hold on 2 seconds.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. It always does this to me. I don't know why, because it has my phone information, and I should get in instantly. Okay. So the University of Penn, the Trump administration reached a deal with the University of Penn to strip transgender swimmer of past titles. So this was Leah Thomas, the famous Leah Thomas, who I guess competed in the men's swimming division for a couple of years before switching over, saying she was trans and enable, not collaborate. Okay, it's a kind of collaboration, but we'll worry about that later. We'll talk about that over tea one day. So Leah Thomas was a source of great controversy for a time, and it started a massive movement within the right-wing culture to counter this transgender agenda, which has been more or less saturating the academic community and started infiltrating into businesses and into hiring practices and then into sports, so that women could, or men who had transitioned to become transgender women, could make claims that they were women and could play in women's sports. And the Trump administration has been aligned against this, and as recently won against the University of Penn, which they were about to deny them something like $100 million in grants, and so that forced their hand to move in the direction of apologizing to people for their past policies, stripping Leah Thomas of her accolades, and then I guess working on making a different kind of inclusive policy. What do you think of this Trump administration and the Department of Education war on the University of Pennsylvania?
First of all, let me just say that I think it's absurd that men compete against women. That's the first thing. But my bigger concern here is that the government is involved in this at all. But again, this is similar. It's analogous to the U.S. government funding Israel, right? Because now the U.S. government has a say, or in what Israel does. Similarly, when these universities line up at the government trough for funding, they become subject to what the government says. So it's just so ridiculous that we're in this situation where the federal government of the United States is involved in what a college sports team does. I mean, and people think this is legitimate. It's not legitimate. The government should have no business in this at all. The government should have no business in what colleges teach. But those colleges, I'm sorry for not feeling overly bad for them, because they don't have a problem when they're getting the money, right? But this is what this show ultimately is about, and what, to me, the Capitalist Party is ultimately about. It's getting a proper vision of what government is supposed to be doing, and I assure you, it's not funding colleges and making decisions about whether dudes get to compete in women's sports.
So I 100% agree on every level. I think it's absurd that men who transition to women can make claims that they are women and can compete in women's sports. You don't see, interestingly, Mike, you don't see the reverse happening. Women who have transitioned to become men, you don't see them trying out for the NFL or the NBA or any men's sports, because I think they know that there's just absolutely biological differences between them, and there's no possible way they could compete. Leah Thomas was something like ranked 500th in male in the men's swimming competition until she transitioned to a woman and started competing against women, where she broke all kinds of world college records. That just shows you there's a physical difference between men and women. Now, that's a fact. We acknowledge it as objectivists, but we also say, as capitalists, that's none of the government's business. Frankly, one, they shouldn't be funding universities at all. All education should be private. And then what the university does is subject to the market. And that means if their rules, and you as a consumer or somebody who is actually wants to enter into the market in academia, you can choose whether or not you like this school's policies. And other schools can choose whether or not they like those schools' policies and choose not to compete with them if they don't like their policies. And I suspect, Michael, that lots of people feel the way we do, meaning that this is a rather outrageous and bizarre interpretation of humanity, and that maybe it's breaking with the laws of logic, And they would probably speak with their pocketbooks or their feet and go somewhere that was preferable to them. And they wouldn't need the government oversight. They wouldn't need government to be our daddy, monitoring everything we do. The government doesn't have to look after women in women's sports. Women have to look after women in women's sports. Your parents and yourselves have to look after yourselves. And that's the kind of, I think, solution that a capitalist market would provide, because you would have alternatives. And that person wouldn't be violating your rights at all, because you could choose not to compete with them. You could choose to go to a school that doesn't abide by those rules and competes with people who abide by the rules you abide by. And to me, that's a more peaceful world. Would you agree?
I would, of course, I would agree. Yes, the privatization is the way to go, and it would produce all the wonderful results that Mark's talking about. And it seems that after I posted about how the people were agreeing with me in the audience about this issue with their 100%, that now there's a movement in the comments to agree with Mark. But remember, Mark is a boomer, and until Mark can figure out
Not a boomer,
he can figure out how to put your comments up on the screen, I'm not going to do it, because I want to see the ones that are praising me.
So I'm not boomer. I'm boomer adjacent. Just to be clear.
Well, let's see you then. Put one of the comments here up on the screen.
So speaking about, hold on a second. Let me speak about this next issue, because it's equally chilling, if not more so, because Paramount settled with President Trump. So President Trump had a lawsuit against Paramount 60 Minutes because of the way in which they edited Kamala Harris's interview. He thought they were able to come up with this law with respect to sales and fraud during sales and falsely representing items that you're selling as a pretense to drop, I don't know, something like a $20 billion lawsuit against 60 Minutes. Now, he did this before he was president, but it's been settled now for $16 million. Now that $16 million doesn't go to Trump, but it does go to the presidential library. Now, this is very, very chilling to me, that a president would use the power and leverage of the presidency or the potential presidency to leverage a news organization, which frankly can edit an interview in any way it chooses. It's not harming you by editing in any way it chooses. You have alternative news sources to make up your mind about things. I certainly would want somebody to edit things in my favor, to take out the ums and ahs and staggers, that happen when you're extemporaneously speaking. And you have no right really to tell the editor what to do unless you own that particular network. Those are the people who have control over their property, not the president of the United States, and particularly not the FCC, which is one of the reasons I think they settled for $16 million, was because the FCC had their merger up for grabs. And so Trump used this merger that Paramount was going to be merging with, what is it, Sky News, or I forget the exact organization. They've been in a merger for several years. This is a huge deal for this company. And the FCC put it on hold. The Biden administration was putting it through. Then Trump's administration put it on hold again, clearly using it as leverage against CBS. I think this is very chilling. The president has no business doing this kind of stuff. What do you say, Michael?
Well, yeah, you actually said the key to me, one of the keys anyways, there was two things and one of them I forgot, but the idea that the FCC is in control of whether this organization can merge or not, and they're also, the administration is involved in suing, is very scary. Also, the fact that the money is going to Trump's personal library is utterly ridiculous. And it seems, the free speech experts out there are of one opinion on this. They're saying, no, this is absurd. This is a clear free speech violation. But, people cheer it. They love it. Oh, yeah, he's fighting back. He's taking them on. It's much like, this so-called alligator Alcatraz that they're building, or they have.
Can you believe that?
It's so repugnant. And I guess Trump was making jokes about the wildlife chasing immigrants or something. Like, it's just so gross. It's so indicative of the lack of civility that we've come to accept, and in some cases approve of in this society.
When does a president of a free society actually publicize visiting a prison or a detention center as a virtue?
I don't know. And there's also the
Horrifying.
question of these politicians, like this, calling him the sanctimonious. He kept calling DeSantis the sanctimonious. You're not going to do that to me, and then I'm going to stand next to you like we're pals. If I'm Ted Cruz, you're not going after my wife and father, and then I'm going to support you. No, it's not going to happen. But in politics, they're just such sycophants that's what ends up happening. It's really, really gross on a lot of levels.
Yeah, that these folks kowtow to Trump, I mean, is amazing to me. They have no integrity at all. Do they stand for anything? Clearly not. They stand for power, and that's why they're sitting and standing side by side Trump now after all the things that he's done.
Mark, give an answer to this question, Mark.
I think exposing the lies that we get from the media is an issue. How should we correct the media? Well, you have corrections all over the place. You have multiple outlets for news that are not just establishment news, which is now, frankly, where most people are leaving the establishment news and going to alternative news sources. And so, I think exposés of lies are good. That's not necessarily the government's responsibility. I think that could be done in the private sector as well. People are their own policemen in respect to information. They put out, the answer to fake speech or false speech or lies is more truth. It's more speech. It's not less. It's not restraints. It's more, so that you can make up your mind as an individual citizen.
Great answer.
So, look, Reason Magazine has said something that we have known all along, but they've confirmed it with data. The real opioid crisis isn't prescriptions, it's prohibition. Hello. I mean, even the libertarians have been saying this. Oops, I might have gotten ourselves in a little bit of trouble. That was just a comment from Mark Pellegrino, not the American Capitalist Party. So I'm not implying that libertarians are stupid, because they're not, mostly.
Oh, my goodness.
But we have been saying prohibition has been the issue all along, but Trump campaigned on the fentanyl crisis. The fentanyl crisis even made its way into the first season of the show that I did, American Rust. There was a fentanyl crisis in the town of Buell, Pennsylvania, and it became there were multiple overdoses in the town, and the culprit had to be caught. Well, it turns out that as the government has been cracking down on opioid prescriptions, by the way, depriving people who are seriously in chronic pain of medication, the overdose and addiction levels have gone up. So the less supply that has been made to the demand legally, the more they have turned to the black market and to risky drugs and to counterfeit drugs in order to get relief. And this article does a fantastic job. Can you post this article, since you're not a boomer, Michael?
I'll post it right now. It's going to X.
So everybody should see this. The more the government has put restraints on a drug for which there is a market, the more the crisis has increased. The more people have become addicted, and the more people have died from overdoses because they are subjecting themselves to counterfeit drugs, or drugs that are laced with chemicals that can harm them. So, Michael, I mean, what are we going to do about this war on drugs? And is there a position that the Capitalist Party takes on the war on drugs?
The Capitalist Party is opposed to drugs, and opposed to the war on drugs. And this article was written by Jeffrey Singer, who I've interviewed at least once, maybe twice, and he's very good on the issue. And the idea that drug companies are responsible for addiction or are responsible for overdoses is silly. This is not how most people get addicted to drugs. I forget what the numbers are, but it's like something like 1% or less of people that are prescribed prescription drugs become hooked on them. It's a very low number.
It was 9%.
How much?
I think it was 9%. Which is still very low.
That sounds very, very high to me.
All right, let me see. Keep going.
But okay, you got me doing two things at once. Post the article, give you my taking drugs. But yeah, so obviously, if I'm able to go buy pharmaceutical drugs, right? Oxycontin, whatever. It's not going to be laced with fentanyl. Drug manufacturers are not putting hidden ingredients in their drugs, right? I go and buy drugs from the guy on the corner. I have no clue what's in that. None. So it makes sense that you're going to have more overdoses. Also, I don't know what the dose is that I'm getting, which I do when I'm buying Oxycontin. So let me post this article. So it just makes sense that you would have less of these. You would have less overdoses if people are using those drugs than when they're made not available. Also, by the way, people are suffering in pain because doctors are afraid to prescribe these drugs. Pain.
I have a friend right now, actually, who's 80 years old. He suffers from chronic pain in his knees and his neck. It's arthritis. It's pain that it's from several chronic diseases that he has. And he has been basically forbidden to use certain types of pain medication that were actually quite good at alleviating his pain because they've been scheduled in such a way as to make it prohibitive. Yes, it's 9%. So it says the data from the Substance and Mental Health Services Administration found that only 9% of non-medical opioid users in 2001 reported ever using OxyContin in their lifetime. So he's talking,
no. That's not my question.
Yeah. So you're saying
it's how many people who are prescribed drugs end up with an addiction.
Yeah. So that's probably closer. You're right. Because look, the doctor's monitoring you have a doctor monitoring the drug intake. The doctor's going to know based on the number of prescriptions a person is using whether or not that person is addicted, and of course can opt out. So that's probably why the addiction rate is so low. Very few doctors will let themselves go along with a patient who's doing that. So look, once again, it's about the government has no responsibility in monitoring your behavior, the substances that you choose to take, or the levels of medication that you can take. This is a personal agreement between you and your physician that the government has no place in interfering with at all. And as usual, their solutions to problems incentivize more problems. And then that creates an incentive to create greater regulation, greater restraint, which in turn creates greater problems. So we have a task in front of us, Michael, as free market guys, to convince the world because that it's prohibition that's causing the drug overdoses, not just Chinese laced fentanyl chemicals coming over from cartels. It's not about beating down the Chinese fentanyl production. It's not about beating the cartels. It's about legalizing these drugs so that now a person goes through their physician to get them. And you'll start lowering the rates of addiction and overdose. Yes. What does the Ariana say there at the bottom? It was that pharma companies undersold now addictive. The problem was that pharma companies undersold how addictive opioids were. That's why they gave my mom, an addict, 3 months of methadone, which she took most in one night. Oh, Lord. Okay. What do you say to that?
I don't know the specifics, so it's very difficult for me to comment on.
Well, the comment. Can you say anything about pharma companies?
Well, I don't know. She says that her mother was prescribed. What does it say? 3 months of methadone, which she took most of one night and died. In my experience, and I don't know because I don't live in Alabama, pharmaceutical companies are not prescribing methadone. People go to methadone clinics and they get on methadone. And if you earn the trust, like say I'm on methadone and I've been on methadone for 10 years and I have no dirty urines, no problems, nothing. They start to give you take-home bottles. And the amount of take-home bottles you get, it corresponds to how responsible they think you are so that you don't have to come every day. Mark disappears. So you don't have to go every day to the methadone clinic. So I don't know. That's why I said I don't know the specifics of Ariana's case. By Mark, I guess. I think Mark opted out because he doesn't want to have to give the capitalist thought of the day. Ashley shrugged. I'm not by no means defending methadone clinics. I'm just saying that the methadone clinic, from what I understand in Connecticut anyway, differ from pharmaceutical companies prescribing medications. It's a different thing. And I don't know why her mother was given these, and this, I can't really, give a strong opinion on the subject. Perhaps if Mark Pellegrino is coming back, his devices aren't connected. He's given all kinds of problems. But the bottom line is methadone clinics as they currently exist shouldn't be in business anyways. What we should have is a free market in all of these things. Mark, can you hear us? Well, we can hear Mark. I'm going to mute Mark until we can actually see him, and that way we know what's going on. Oh, okay. So Ariana says it was in Michigan and for chronic pain. Okay, so it's a different scenario altogether than what I'm familiar with as relates to the methadone clinics. Mark, can you hear me? Oh, well, Mark has muted himself. So there's that. I feel bad for poor Mark, but he's not here. So I guess I will be giving the capitalist thought of the day. And that is that many of the issues that we've been discussing. Mark, can you hear me? Now I can't mute him. Okay, there he goes. Okay, many of the issues that we've been discussing today, for instance, the case of the transgender athletes, the case of the freedom of speech in regard to the lawsuits against CBS, or the issue here as relates to drug use. In a free market, many of the problems that we see wouldn't be occurring. In a free market, for instance, as an athlete, I would be able to sign up and compete against the athletes that I chose, and they would be able to do the same. This refers to the leagues, right up to the schools I go to, whatever. Here's Mark back now. We'll put him on. He's trying to get in. I don't know what the problem is. And then if you think about the issue of the drugs, and in a free market, we would not have, for instance, all these impurities in the drugs that people do not know about. People wouldn't go to doctors that weren't good. They wouldn't be dependent on doctors to prescribe. They would be, Mark, you're making a ton of noise. I can't mute him. Mute. I can't mute you, Mark. You're making a ton of noise. Everybody sees your silly mug. I'm taking you off the screen. So the bottom line is that free markets are the answer to most of our problems that we've addressed today. Not maybe most of the problems in life, but the ones that we've had today. Liberate the markets, allow people to exercise their freedom of choice. That's the solution. Now, everybody, please remember to like, share, and subscribe this program. Despite our technical difficulties, I think we put a very good show on, and I hope you will agree. Check us out at theamericancapitalistparty.org. And I will say it for Mark since he's not here today. Remember to always check your premises, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.